Hello, and welcome to the Engineering Influence podcast from ACEC. My name is Thomas Grogan, Senior Director, Economics and Market Intelligence here at ACEC, and I'm also the Staff Director of the Technology Committee. We're really excited to have Jason Miller, Head of Innovation from Ramble, on our podcast today. Jason, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
All right. Well, I'm just going to dive in with a question that we've been asking all our guests over the past year. And it is essentially, what does digital transformation mean to you?
That's a big question. So I think one of the things that we really think about when we think about digital transformation at Ramble is the breadth of it, right? And that certainly when we talk about digital transformation, there's a big piece that's thinking about foundational technologies and how we can better use data and begin to reuse data and create more value from it. But one of the biggest pieces for us is how are we really training and upskilling our colleagues, right, to take advantage of digital transformation and to come along with us on the journey for what the AEC industry of the future is going to look like, right? So for us, there's a huge piece of it that's around people and around ways of working and around obviously how we can create better value for our clients. So I think that's the biggest piece for us, right? Is remembering to look beyond just the data and the tech, right? And the geeky portions of it and begin thinking about really how it's going to change the industry and what we all need to do to get ready for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then, the segues well to my next question, mentioning working with the people and training them, upskilling them, and thinking about bigger, let's say, business objectives of your firm. What does your day-to-day look like as head of innovation at Ramble? And, how you kind of think or work cross-functionally so that, you're not just in software or tech all day and accomplishing these bigger objectives.
Right. So, personally, my background is as a consultant, predominantly in the environmental space, right? So that's how I grew up, so to speak, right? So, and I dearly love and treasure the time I still get to work directly with clients, and I hold on to that very, very tightly, even though it's only 5 or 10% of maybe of my time, because I think that's super valuable. But actually, within Ramble, earlier this year, we created a new organization, which we just called Ramble Tech, right? Not perhaps the most inventive name we've come up with, but where we wanted to sort of bring together a lot of the different resources around the organization. So our innovation team, our colleagues working on digital transformation and transforming the way we deliver our services, and also a growing number of our AI developer and design colleagues, right? So we can bring everybody together in one organization to really begin to sort of make a bigger change and a faster change as we see the pace of change increasing. So with all of that, I've spent a lot of time, obviously, the last several months working with colleagues, getting that new organization up and running and bringing all the pieces together. But one of the other big questions that is on my plate right now is to think hard about what's happening in the ecosystem around us as Ramble, right? So what can we do together with other AEC firms? What can we co-create with clients, right, to solve major sustainability challenges, which is obviously at the core of Ramble's mission. And then, what can we also do with startups, with large technology vendors or other non-traditional partners, right? So that's a big question for me right now is sort of remembering to look outside ourselves, right, and think how can we solve some of these major sustainability challenges and move faster on digital transformation by working with others.
Yeah, and that, brings up a good point. What sort of lessons learned outside an AEC firm or lessons not learned, right? Some failures maybe. Have you noticed or, what are you looking to, let's say, borrow or steal that you're seeing in maybe other industries or partners or in the startup world that maybe traditionally hasn't happened at an AEC firm?
Right. So we've, one of the things that we're trying to steal and think about how to bring into the AEC, more traditional AEC firm is a little bit of the pace and the acceptance of failure, right, that you can get within a lot of tech startups, particularly tech startups, right? And I think, for very good and sound reasons, AEC firms are built around avoiding failure, right? And that's not going to change, I hope, right? That'd be a very bad day. And so, but what we are talking about is, obviously there are times when we can't fail, right? on major design projects, you can't quote unquote fail, right? But we can talk about, some of the ways that we want to bring new ways of delivering those design services to market. And certainly early on, when we're thinking about what those design services should look like, how we could package an offering, there is an opportunity for failure, except that then you have to start thinking about, how do I encourage people to take those risks at the right times and not feel like they're taking a career risk, right? So that's one of the things that we've been talking about a little bit, is how can we bring some of that speed from the startup ecosystem into Ramble. And we've successfully nurtured a couple of internal startups up over $1 million in annual recurring revenue and growing. We have 2 of them at that, greater than $1 million size, and hope to get a third one online very quickly. But, so that's one question for us, is like, how can we bring that inside and sort of make it work with the sort of traditional AEC, ethics and design work where you can't fail, right? So how do we run that line? So that's a big thing that we want to try and bring in board. I think another thing that we've talked a lot about is that sort of I think we as AECs sometimes get into the habit of wanting to build it ourselves, right? And reminding ourselves that, particularly with technology moving as fast as it is right now, and generative AI in particular, right, we need to remember not to do that, right? And to think more aggressively about when we can work with others, who may have expertise more on the technology side, where we can bring in data, right, and create something together. And remember to shift our way of thinking a little bit in that outside of that traditional partner model.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I'm guessing, the concept of ARR, annual recurring revenue, maybe took a little bit to, bring into. It comes from a different business model in the software SaaS world versus just basically being billable and utilization. So there's probably a bit of education around concepts like that as well.
Well, there is, absolutely, right. And there's also the question of that we are all very traditionally inclined toward the billable hour as the way we measure success, right? Individually, as a team, and as larger departments and organizations. And so is then that question, if we're starting to deliver more and more value through technology and software and new offerings, the billable hour isn't necessarily the right tool for that, right? So it is then questions of things like ARR, net revenue per employee, all of these different metrics that we have to think about, and then have some pretty frank conversations with our clients about, what's the right business model for us to do something together, right? If it's not the billable hour model.
Yeah, totally. So you had mentioned, working with data. Data is a very, important pillar, let's say, of kind of technology. How do you think about having a data strategy and, being nimble, using data to do data-driven decision making at your firm and in your role?
We're actually deep in the midst of a reset of our corporate data strategy, and the big initiative drive around that is, trying to talk about moving from the paradigm where we create data, use data, and store data on sort of a project level, where it tends to then die at the project level. Mm-hmm. But to begin thinking about a data strategy where we start talking about, are there specific data products that we create when we do project work that we can then build on and reuse, right? Are there, for example, specific design components of our top performing, most sustainable bicycle bridges, right, in Denmark that can be used as building blocks for the next generation of bridges? How can we begin to think about data reuse in that point of view? Is there data that we generate when we're doing an environmental impact assessment that we can begin thinking about that data would have value the next time we do an environmental impact assessment? Right. So what we're doing within our corporate data strategy right now is actually taking a little bit of a lean startup MVP approach to a data strategy, right? And so we've defined, some of what are our core data strategy ethics or pillars, right? Things like, do we want data to be shareable, to whom? How do we talk about security and ownership rights and reuse? Those are common based on the company's ethics, right? And then what we're saying is we will identify some of these highest value data products that we think will be highest value data products. And then let's start talking about what's the tech stack, what's the way that we need to change the way we work with that data to begin making that data more reusable, right? But we're taking a very incremental approach to that in some respects, because we're basically saying if we tried to redo the data strategy for the entire company, or it would around reusable data, we'd never finish, right? So let's start talking about some of these prioritized products that we think we can very quickly get out there, get our engineers and scientists using and generating value. Let's build the systems for those, and then take the common elements from those systems and use that to build off the next generation of products, and spin the flywheel that way.
Absolutely. And what you've talked about, somewhat sophisticated. Ramble is an international company, many employees, happy to have them as a member of ACEC. ACEC also has member firms that are 1-person, 5-person, 10-person companies. And so if you were at one of these smaller firms, how would you think about a data strategy? And is, a data strategy going to be necessary, when you have to balance different projects and employee bandwidth and all the different capacity constraints you might have? Kind of what advice would you have for someone getting started who maybe doesn't have all the resources? And also, maybe it might be overwhelming to think about all the things that can be accomplished, but it's like, try to focus on what you do best and stick to your swim lane. How would you tackle a problem like that?
Right. Yeah. So it's actually, I started my career at a much smaller firm. I think I was the 36th employee, right? So when I started, so yeah, I've sort of seen both sides of that a little bit, and being in that world and now being in the Ramble side of the house. One of the things that's interesting to me is actually a smaller firm that has expertise in particular areas has some advantages, right? I mean, one of the challenges that some of the challenges I just went through that Ramble is dealing with, there it is, we've been in business since 1945. We've got almost 18,000 employees. If you tried to convert the services that we offer to clients to start thinking about a product list, it'd go on and on and on, like we were some, 1990s era conglomerate, right? And so that actually gives us a challenge to think about what data could we reuse, what's valuable, what's probably not going to be valuable, right? There's a lot of work that we have to do on that side of the house. But a smaller firm actually has some advantages, right? Because you're dealing with a smaller data universe, right? And you can be more nimble, more agile, right? And so I guess that's my first statement: is don't get scared by size and scale and lack of resources, right? Because I think that if you can, think about some of the high value work that you do for clients, right? That is sort of more specific to, where you're based or the particular client sector that you serve, and think about how you can couple that with a lot of the freely available data to create something different, right? Because that's the key. You don't have to build a data product that's wholly unique. You just need to add your special spice and sauce mix to it, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that is it is the same question, though. It's starting to think about, instead of generating data, storing it in a file share under a project code and never looking at it again, it's starting to ask that question: wait, how could we reuse this data next time? What here is reusable? And then starting to think about, well, then how should I store it? How should I, and there's a million ways to do that, right? Of differing levels of complexity. But I think it's the same question, but I think actually smaller firms will probably get there faster than we will in some places.
Yeah. So going back to a point you made when you were first talking about digital transformation and the need to be holistic and include the people involved, how do you, or does your group or Ramble kind of work with, maybe it's your chief people officer or chief talent developer, to upskill, keep your employees engaged, and kind of provide the resources, or think about what resources you will provide, your worker, your employees, so that, they're up to date, being efficient, and don't feel left behind by everything that's kind of happening in the media talking about technology and change?
Yeah, so we tend to think of our service catalog, so to speak, right? When we talk about how we help our colleagues, we tend to think about it at three horizons, right? One is the sort of offering that we deliver to teams that we have tasked to create, new large language model based software products helping us with automatic report generation, right? Obviously, it's a brand new way of delivering a service. They get a very high level of touch and a lot of a very personalized help, right? And not just help, but engagement in the project from our developers, from our digital marketers, from our staff that are really good at co-creation workshops with clients. That's sort of one tier. Then we sort of say that we within our major key account organizations and within the major client sector organizations that we have within Ramble, we want to make sure that the leaders of a lot of those organizations are getting another level of training, right, on how to talk about digital transformation with clients and sort of frankly have open conversations about the challenges we see, the challenges our clients see, how everyone thinks markets are moving, and just try and be open and build the relationship, right, in part based on that mutual sharing of challenges and learnings. But also obviously make sure that they understand what resources we have within Ramble to bring to bear to help a client with a task. And then the third group is sort of every colleague within Ramble, right? We want to make sure that we're giving them access to tools, and we are big, right? So that we can't do that in person for everyone. And so, one of the challenges we've set ourselves, for example, is, from our, directly from our CEO, is to make sure that all staff within Ramble receive some AI specific education, right? Would it be, and that, within the next, I'd love to say within the next 6 months, hopefully we'll get that done that quickly or maybe even faster. That'll be a mix of virtual with some in person. And it'll be an evolving thing, right? Because what we've talked about is, we can talk about the current best of class tools in the market, and some different things that we have available, but it's just changing so fast. Back to your point, that part of it is giving them some comfort that it's okay that it's changing. Here's how you handle some basics. Here's the people that you can reach out to when you need to know more, right? So we are exactly working with our chief people officer to build that sort of catalog, right, of resources within our, sort of digital training materials. And then, like I said, trying to work more in person with some specific teams. But it's a big job. It's a big job.
Yeah. I mean, training 18,000 people just to do their timesheets properly with the right time codes can be a challenge. Although who knows, maybe AI will automate all of that, right?
Well, that was going to be it's a joke and not a joke. We did a series of surveys around, what would you like to see AIs help you with? And far and away, the most upvoted request was, can you help me automate my timesheet with AI? So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so for firms who maybe are going to start a digital transformation, what do you think the biggest or some of the biggest risks they might face trying to go on this transformation, and they should, keep in mind as they begin this journey?
I would say one big risk is placing too big a bet too quickly, locking yourself into a particular vendor solution or locking yourself into a particular development pathway too early, right? We are, with everything that's been happening with large language models, there's been a lot of change in the technology space affecting AECs, right? We're seeing, the large vendors, the Autodesks, S3s, Bentleys of the world, right, adapting their platforms to bring those tools on board. That pace of change is not going to slow down, right? So when you're just beginning, that sort of flexibility is key to not overcommit to a particular solution. And I can give a Ramble specific example to that, right? We're deep into an analysis of, Microsoft Copilot and Microsoft Copilot M365 and, various products available from OpenAI and others, and trying to decide, how do we want to make that decision and not be locked in, right, to a pathway that we feel like a year from now we'd be really frustrated about. So, it's this, you be careful about where you put your resources and how fast you place them. And what we try to talk about a lot for that is, do you know the customer problem you're solving? Do you know the client problem you're solving? And really build around that. Design your solution around the problem that you're solving rather than around a particular technology. And if and that customer or client problem you're solving, that can be an internal challenge that your design engineers are facing, or it can be something one of your customer segments is facing that you think you can help with. So customer or client in this case can be internal or external, but you got to talk to them, right? And you got to get direct input and feedback and get away from that assumption and really put the time and the effort up front and that validation before you go too far down the road of actually starting to build or buy software. It's a mistake we've made, where we've moved too fast on the tech side and realized we've created a wonderful solution to a problem that we didn't really have. But that's a constant learning and push for us, is stay focused on the customer problem.
Yeah. And so, this is something we talked about a little bit on one of our digital transformation webinar series, is when do you know to kind of stop the initiative because you're going down the wrong path, or, it frankly is going to your point, let's learn how to fail faster and be okay with failing. What are warning signs? What are things a leader should keep in mind for, being smart, not getting caught up in that sunk cost fallacy and pivoting?
Yeah. And hopefully a lot of times it is pivot, not stop, right? Because you've learned and you can take those learnings and bring them on in a different direction, right? I mean, one of our most successful internal startups, right, was pointed very much at a particular customer segment, was getting, some sales, some traction. And then they had a number of really good conversations with clients in that sector who were basically saying, yeah, we don't feel the industry is going to be ready for 18 to 24 months for some of what you want to try and do. And they pivoted, right? And they pivoted to a different customer segment that it was at the better time. The time was more ready, right? Everything was a better sweet spot, and they're doing quite well. So, and they took a lot of learnings forward. So it is sometimes think about how you can pivot, don't kill. But yeah, that is a key piece. And so one of the things that we talk a lot about is the sort of early stage gates, right? And what evidence do we have of the problem and that we're on the right track with the solution, even before we really do any serious development or acquisition, right? So can we do something with, sort of dummy, UX or dummy workflows where we sort of say, listen, this is the problem as we see it. We would like to do this as sort of a whiteboarded solution, test that out. And that is something that it's very challenging to take something that incomplete to a client and have a discussion with them about it. Mm-hmm. But frankly, if you're willing to do that and go in and have a discussion that's not about selling and it's about, hey, we think this is the problem. Are we on the right track? They can turn into just great conversations, right? Because then you're talking about a joint problem and how do you solve it together? But that's something that for us is we really want to see evidence internally of, yes, you understand my problem. This is an issue. If you solve that, it's really going to help my workflow. Or externally, yeah, you've got this. We've got this issue. We would pay money if you come up with a solution. Those are the sorts of things we like to see early on before we really start, triggering development costs, right? So we will often encourage teams and give teams time and space to go out, do the workshops, do the interviews, have the discussions. We don't want to talk to you about code. Right. If you come in with a presentation and talk to us about code and tech platform, then you're going to get a no, right, at the beginning stages. So that's a lot of it for us is in the beginning, we want you to talk to us about your customer and their problem. And then once we've comfortable that you've got that locked, then you can come in and talk to us about time, space, and money for development or acquisition.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. Well, I'm going to ask one last question and want to end on a positive note and kind of get your thoughts on what you think, what the biggest opportunities are for a firm that would begin their digital transformation and, what positives they can look out for.
Yeah. So I actually, the one for me is there's a huge amount of energy coming from younger colleagues and people coming out of school right now around digital transformation and the new capabilities that we're going to have, right, to solve problems core to the AEC industry, right? We really, I think there's the energy there and the belief, and I think it's a correct belief that with a lot of the new digital tools available, we can solve some of these very pernicious, very difficult sustainability problems, right? That we can couple digital capabilities to talented engineers and scientists and do things that we couldn't do a year ago or 2 years ago. And there's energy for that. So I'm very optimistic about that. And I don't, for me, I don't look at this as digital transformation replacing engineers or scientists, but it is, to quote one of my colleagues, it's really giving them superpowers, right? And I think you position it that way, you talk about it that way, the energy is there to really build something exciting.
Great. Well, Jason, thank you so much for joining the Engineering Influence podcast here at ACEC, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks. You too.
All right. Thanks.